Quick recapitulation of Pearl-S-Bugs The Enemy. It is set in the backdrop of World War II in a coastal town of Japan, and Sadao Hoki, a very famous doctor and surgeon who comes across the prisoner of war who was an American soldier in the US Navy, and his name is Tom. And yesterday we left at the juncture where we were about to see how Sadao Hoki was going to operate this man in order to save his life so that he can be handed over to the Japan government. So we'll start, and also we have to remember the underlying themes, that is, first of all, the moral dilemma that the doctor faces, whether he should be a true patriot, and as a true patriot should have done, whether he should have handed him over to the government and be a true patriot, or he would stand tall and he would do justice to his profession by saving the man, service towards humanity. So what comes first was his question, the question that was tearing him apart from within. So let's start with page number 34. This man, Sadao thought, there is no reason under heaven why he should leave. So, being an enemy and having gone through all these hardships, according to Sadao Hoki, there is no reason under heaven why he should leave. So, this is again an example of the conflict that was going on in his mind. Unconsciously, this thought made him ruthless and he proceeded swiftly. I would expect all of you to have a textbook in front of you so that the understanding of the story is constructive and so that you understand it in a better light. So, unconsciously, this thought made him ruthless and he proceeded swiftly. In his dream, the man moaned, but Sadao paid no heed except to mutter at him. So the man groaned, the war prisoner, but Sadao did not pay any attention to such groaning because he wanted to complete his task, the task of a doctor. He wanted to save the man's life, and that's it. So there was no emotional bonding with the enemy, but just he was doing his duty, he was doing his duty towards a human being a doctor. Groan, he muttered. He here refers to the doctor. He muttered that you groan, speaking to the war prisoner. Groan if you like. I'm not doing this for my own pleasure. So it's a kind of a self-justification. The fact that he is helping the man, the fact that he's saving the life of an enemy, he couldn't justify himself that why was he doing it. So it's a kind of a self-justification that he gives, that I'm not doing this for my own pleasure. In fact, he knew actually in his deep, deep down in his heart, he was well aware of the fact why he was doing it. He was serving humanity, but then he was not ready to accept it. So constantly there was a battle that was going on within him, that what am I doing, is it right? That question that Shakespeare raised, to be or not to be. Okay, so in fact I do not know why I'm doing it, Sadao says. The door opened and there was Hannah again. So Hannah enters. Remember what happened to Hannah? Hannah, she went out and she threw up. She didn't feel good because she had never been in an operation theater, or she did not ever see an operation that was going on. So that's why she felt very, very uneasy, and she went out and she threw up. So she entered after that. The door opened and there was Hannah again. Where is the anesthetic? She asked in a clear voice. Sadao motioned with his chin. It is well that you came back. This fellow is beginning to stir. So it's good that you have come back. This fellow is already beginning to stir. Stir means movement. He was moving a bit because he needs anesthetic. Otherwise things would be very difficult for the patient. So she had the bottle and some cotton in her hand. But how shall I do it? Hannah did not know how to apply it. Simply saturate the cotton and hold it near his nostrils, Sadao replied. Sadao told his wife how to do it. Without delaying for one moment the intricate detail of his work, when he breathes badly, move it away a little. So when the breathing becomes very, very fast, or when he breathes very, in a very different way, or he breathes very fast at that time, you move it away. So that was the instruction that was given to Sadao. That was given to Hannah by Sadao. She crouched close to the sleeping face of the young American. It was a piteously thin face. Okay, so the description of the war prisoner's face. She crouched close to the sleeping face of the young American. It was a piteously thin face, she thought, and the lips were twisted. The man was suffering whether he knew it or not. Watching him, she wondered if the stories they heard sometimes of the sufferings of prisoners were true. So the torture that was meted out to the war prisoners, according to rumors, whether it was true or not, Hannah was wondering at that time. See, watching him, she wondered, she thought, whether if the stories they heard sometimes of the sufferings of war prisoners were true, whether the war prisoners were treated mercilessly or cruelly, whether the stories were true or not, Hannah was wondering. So she could not, do away with this thought. So that was making her think. They came like flickers of rumor. So that the rumor, it is said that rumor has it. So we all know that rumor has it. So it was a rumor that was being circulated that war prisoners were treated in a very, very merciless manner. And whether it was true or not, watching him, this thought occurred to Hannah. In the newspapers, the reports were always that wherever the Japanese armies went, the people received them gladly, with cries of joy and their liberation. But sometimes she remembered such men as General Takima, who at home beat his wife cruelly, though no one mentioned it now that he had fought so victorious a battle in Manchuria. If a man like that could be so cruel to a woman, wouldn't he be rather so cruel to a woman in his power? Would he not be cruel to one like this, for instance? So then in the newspaper, the news came that Japanese armies, the Japanese armies went to people, received them gladly, and the cries of joy at the liberation. But there was also a man called General Takima who was very, merciless to his wife. He used to beat up his wife. So Hannah wondered, if a man could beat up a woman, then how would he have behaved? How would he have treated the war prisoners? So this question itself gives the answer that probably or perhaps the war prisoners were treated in a very ruthless and merciless manner by the Japanese army. So if a man like that could be so cruel to a woman in his power, would he not be cruel to one like this, for instance? So there is a question, a rhetorical one, and we all know what the answer can be. She hoped anxiously that this young man had not been tortured. It was at this moment that she observed deep red scars on his neck just under the ear. And at this point, she becomes certain that probably, or perhaps certainly, this man too was tortured by the army. So how does she know? She hoped anxiously that this young man had not been tortured. And it was at this moment that she observed deep red scars on his neck. These scars give evidence to the fact that yes, he was tortured. Just under the ear. Those scars, she murmured, lifting her eyes to Sadao. But he did not answer because he was so engrossed. At this moment, he felt the tip of his instrument strike against something hard. He was very much engrossed in the operation and he did not probably hear or did not feel like giving an answer to Hannah's question, these scars. And at that particular juncture, he felt the tip of his instrument strike against something hard, dangerously near the kidney. And it was placed in a very dangerous position near the kidney. All thought left him. He felt only the purest pleasure because he actually located it. He found it that he was looking for. He probed with his fingers, delicately familiar with every atom of this human body. He was a very, very successful surgeon. His old American professor of anatomy had seen to that knowledge. Ignorance of the human body is the surgeon's cardinal sin, sirs. So when giving a lecture, in one of his classes to the students, and fortunately Sadao was one of the students of this American old professor, and he used to tell his students doctors, that ignorance of the human body is the cardinal sin of a surgeon. Okay, so a surgeon must know every inch of a human body. He had thundered at his classes year after year to operate without as complete knowledge of the body as if you had made it anything less than that is murder. These lines, these words are the words of the American professor, and this American professor was Sadao's professor as well. So to operate, he said, to operate without as complete knowledge of the body is actually, actually killing a man. So as if you had made it anything less than that is murder. That is not less than murder. If a surgeon does not know, if a surgeon does not have complete knowledge of a human body, then probably he's just going to, commit a murder. So it is not quite at the kidney, my friend, Sadao murmured. And Sadao had this strange habit of speaking to himself, okay, when he was operating. So at this moment, he says, it is not quite at the kidney, my friend, Sadao murmured. It was his habit to murmur to the patient when he forgot himself in an operation. So he would speak to himself, and sometimes he would refer to the patient. So this is quite ironical, as he refers to the enemy as friend. See, it is not quite at the kidney, my friend. In a state of work, he forgot that he was actually operating an enemy, and ironically he calls him a friend. So Sadao murmured, it was his habit to murmur to the patient when he forgot himself in an operation. My friend, he always called his patients, and so now he did, forgetting that this was his enemy. Then quickly, with the cleanest and most precise of incisions, the bullet was taken out. The man quivered, but he was still unconscious. Nevertheless, he muttered a few English words. Some of the English words he uttered. Guts, he muttered, choking. They got my guts. Sadao, Hannah cried sharply. Hush, Sadao said. The man sank again into silence so profound that Sadao took up his wrist. Hating the touch of it, yes, there was still a pulse so faint, so feeble, but enough. He wanted the man to live, to give hope. Certainly, I do not want this man to live, Sadao thought. No more anesthetic, he told Anna. He instructs Hannah not to give any more anesthetic. He turned as swiftly as though he had never paused, and from this medicines he chose a small vial, and from it filled a hypodermic and thrust it into the patient's left arm. Then putting down the needle, he took the man's wrist again. The pulse under his fingers fluttered once or twice and then grew stronger. So the description of how the man was given, this man will live in spite of all adverse circumstances, this man will live. The doctor, Sadao Hoki, said to Hannah and sighed. He sighed, a deep breath. The young man woke, so weak, his blue eyes so terrified when he perceived where he was, that Hannah felt compelled to apologize. She herself served him, for none of the servants would enter the room. So Hannah did all. None of the servants would enter the room, so Hannah actually served him. So Hannah was a bit perplexed. When she came in the first time, she saw him summon his small strength to be prepared for some fearful thing. So he gathered and he called all his strength and prepared to be, to face the fearful thing. Don't be afraid, she begged him softly. How come you speak English? He gasped. The young man, he asked a valid question to Hannah, that how come you speak English? It was a long time in America, she replied. So she replied that we were there in America for a long time. She saw that he wanted to reply too, but he could not, and so she knelt and fed him gently from the porcelain spoon. He ate unwillingly, but still he ate. So this tells us how, as doctors, they were serving the man, the ailing man, the war prisoner. They did their duty in absolute, kind and grateful way, but somewhere down they knew that he was an enemy of the state. So now you will soon be strong. He did not answer. When Sadao came in the third day after the operation, he found the young man sitting up, his face bloodless with the effort. Lie down. Do you want to die? So why are you sitting? So you lie down if you don't want to die. So this was a suggestion by him. Okay, a doctor's advice. So he forced the man down gently and strongly and examined the wound. You may kill yourself if you do this sort of thing. What are you going to do with me? The man was very anxious. Man did not know why the Japanese doctor and his wife were, why they were helping him. He did not know their intention, and so in order to know the intention, he asks, and he wants to give an end to this curiosity by knowing the answer, what they were going to do with him. So, what are you going to do with me? Are you going to hand me over? For a moment, Sadao did not answer. He finished his examination and then pulled the silk quilt over the man. I do not know myself what I shall do with you. I ought, of course, to give you to the police. You are a prisoner of war. No, do not tell me anything. He did not want any, anything of, any kind word, any words of affection, any kind of thanks from the man, because that would make him weak. So he would put his hand, and he saw the young man was about to speak. Do not even tell me your name unless I ask it. So he doesn't want a bond to grow between them. Okay, and so that's why he didn't want to know the name. They looked at each other for a moment, and then the young man closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. Okay, he whispered, his mouth a bitter line. Outside the door, Hannah was waiting for Sadao. He saw at once that she was in trouble. Sadao, Yumi tells me the servants feel they cannot stay if we hide this man here anymore. So all the servants started revolting. The servants had to say that if the man stays here, they won't stay. So she tells me that they are saying that you and I were so long in America that we have forgotten to think of our own countries first. They think we like Americans. It is not true, Sadao said harshly. Americans are our enemies, but I have been trained not to let a man die if I can help it. So that was the doctor's, oath. When the doctors take an oath, it's like that. Just whatever happens, they will first serve humanity. That's the first that comes in their list. So, but I have been trained not to let a man die if I can help it. The servants cannot understand that. It's not possible for them to understand this great ideology. So she said anxiously. No, he agreed. Neither seemed able to say more, and somehow the household dragged on. The servants grew more watchful, their courtesy was as careful as ever, but their eyes were cold upon the pair whom they hired. So they were not happy with the master and the mistress, because they were giving shelter to a war prisoner. It is clear what our master ought to do, the old gardener said one morning. He had walked with flowers all his life and had been a specialist too in moss. For Sadao's father, he had made one of the finest moss gardens in Japan, sweeping the bright green carpet constantly so that not a leaf or a pine needle marred or destroyed the velvet of its surface. So he was a very, very industrious gardener, and he did all his work in a very diligent manner. My old master's son knows very well what he ought to do. He now sat pinching a bud from a bush as he spoke. When the man was so near death, why did he not let him bleed? That was his question, that when the man was already dying, why didn't Dr. Sadao allow him to, die? Why did he save him? That young master is so proud of his skill. Being a doctor, according to the gardener, Dr. Sadao was very proud of his skill. That means he was a doctor and he was very proud of that. So to save life, that he saves any life. So being a doctor, he saves any life. That's the thing, exactly that's the thing that the doctor should do. Irrespective of race, creed, nationality, a doctor must save a life only. And while saving a life, the doctor must not see where he belongs from, or what is his nationality, what is his caste, etc., etc. So the gardener says that he saves any life. He does not even consider that he is an enemy. So that was his chief concern. So that young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life, the cook said contemptuously. Okay, so this is the these are the words of the cook. And actually they were into a conversation, the gardener, the cook, and the other servants. And the cook said contemptuously, in a very contemptuous manner, that young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life. She split a fall snake skillfully and held the fluttering bird and let its blood flow into the roots of a wisteria vine. This is also symbolic. They are very ruthless, okay? Very, very, very ruthless. And at that moment she considered that fall to be the enemy. Okay, so symbolic. And the cook said that the doctor is very proud and he just saves any life. And blood is the best of fertilizers, and the old gardener would not let her waste a drop of it. So this entire incident is very, very symbolic. It is the children of whom we must think, Yumi said sadly. What will be their fate if their father is condemned as a traitor? What will the children do? How will they be treated? They did not try to hide what they said from the ears of Hannah as she stood arranging the day's flowers in the veranda nearby, and she knew they spoke on purpose that she might hear. So the servants were having a conversation, and they did not have any intention to hide the conversation from Hannah. They wanted her to listen, and Hannah did. And she was very morose. She was very sad. That they were right, she knew too in most of her being. But there was another part of her which she herself could not understand. It was not sentimental liking of the prisoner. She had come to think of him as a prisoner. She had not liked him even yesterday when he had said in his impulsive way, "Anyway, let me tell you, my name is Tom." She had only bowed her little distant. Enlightens Hannah with his name. He tells that my name is Tom. And as for Sadao, every day he used to come and examine the prisoner. The last stitches had been pulled out this morning, and the young man would in a fortnight be nearly ready and as well as ever. Sadao went back to his office and carefully typed a letter to the chief of police reporting the whole matter. So he reported everything in a letter that he typed, and the letter was addressed to the chief of police. So he was going to, he penned down everything. On the 21st day of February, an escaped prisoner, so here he goes. On the 21st day of February, an escaped prisoner was washed up on the shore in front of my house. So far he typed, and then he opened a secret drawer of his desk and put the unfinished report into it. Why do you think he couldn't proceed further? Once again, he started to feel pangs of emotion for this man. And that's why he was unsure about the fact whether he should write or not. On the 7th day after that, two things happened. So, very, very important, underline. What are the two things that happened? In the morning, the servants left together. The first thing, okay? So, on the 7th day after that, two things happened. The first thing that happened, that is, the servants left together, their belongings tied in a large square cotton kerchiefs. When Hannah got up in the morning, nothing was done. The house was not cleaned, the food not prepared. She knew what it meant. Okay? Being an intelligent woman, she knew what it meant. She knew what it meant. She was dismayed and even terrified, but her pride as a mistress would not allow her to show it. Instead, she inclined her head gracefully. When they appeared before her in the kitchen, she paid them off and thanked them for what all they had done for her. They were crying, but she did not cry. She was very, at this point of time, she became a stoic. So she expressed elements of stoicism. She did not show her emotions. The cook and the gardener had served Sadao since he was a little boy in his father's house, and Yumi cried because of the children. Okay, she used to tend the children. She was so grieving that after she had gone, she ran back to Hannah. "If the baby misses me too much tonight, send for me. I'm going to my own house and you know where it is, so I'll come back if the baby misses me." "Thank you," Hannah said, smiling, but she told herself that she would not send for Yumi however the baby cried. She would manage herself, being the mother. And it was a kind of a self-esteem. Why would she lower that and again call them when they have deserted them? She made the breakfast and Sadao helped with the children. Neither of them spoke to the servants beyond the fact that they were gone. But after Hannah had taken morning food to the prisoner, she came back to Sadao. Why is it we cannot see clearly what we ought to do? She raises the valid question, the apt question of the time. Why is it we don't know what to do? Okay, so why is it we cannot see clearly what we ought to do? She asked him. Even the servants see more clearly than we do. Why are we different from other Japanese? She asked this question. She threw this question towards Sadao. Sadao did not answer, but a little later he went into the room where the prisoner was and said brusquely, "Today you may get upon on your feet. I want you to stay up only 5 minutes at a time. Tomorrow you may try it twice as long. It would be well that you get back to your strength as quickly as possible." So he told the war prisoner that slowly and gradually you have to gather your strength so that you can recover fast. He saw the flicker of terror on the young face that was still very pale. "Okay," the boy murmured. Evidently he was determined to say more. "I feel I ought to thank you, doctor, for having saved my life," the prisoner says. "Don't thank me too early." He saw the flicker of terror again in the boy's eyes. Terror as unmistakable as an animal's before it gets butchered. So the scars on his neck were crimson for a moment. Crimson red. Those scars, what were they? Sadao did not ask. Sadao did not have the courage to ask what those scars were. But he noticed them, the scars. In the afternoon, the second thing happened. Okay, this was the first thing was the servants left, and in the afternoon, the second thing happened. Hannah, working hard on unaccustomed labor, saw a messenger come to the door in official uniform. Okay, a messenger came in official uniform. Her hands went weak because she conjectured that probably the servants went and told everything about the war prisoner, and probably for that the police had come. So she, became very weak. Her hands went weak and she could not draw her breath. The servants must have told already. She ran to Sadao, gasping, unable to utter a word, but by then the messenger had simply followed her through the garden, and there he stood. She pointed at him helplessly. Sadao looked up from his book. He was in his office, the other partition which was thrown open to the garden for the southern sunshine. "What is it?" he asked the messenger. Then he rose, seeing the man's uniform. "You are to come to the palace," the man said. "The old general is in pain again." So remember the old general, why Sadao was not sent back to America or sent abroad, because he had to attend the general who was already ailing. So now time has come for him to serve the general. So he was in pain again. So he was urgently called by the general. He had to go to the palace and attend to him. "The old general is in pain again." "Oh, is that all?" "All?" The messenger did not understand what Hannah was trying to say. So he said that all. The messenger exclaimed, "Is it not enough that general is ailing, is in pain? That's enough for my on my part to come here." "Indeed it is. I'm very sorry." When Sadao came to say goodbye, she was in the kitchen but doing nothing. The children were asleep and she sat merely resting for a moment, more exhausted from her fright than from work. Page number 40. And then Hannah gives vent to her emotion and says, "I thought they had come to arrest you." He gazed down into her anxious eyes. "I must get rid of this man for your sake," he said in distress. "Somehow I must get rid of him." Sadao goes to see the general. Okay, because the general was ailing, the general was in pain, and that's why Sadao goes to see the general. "Of course," the general said weakly. And now the conversation between the general and Sadao. Okay. "Of course," the general said weakly, "I understand fully, but that is because I once took a degree in Princeton. So few Japanese have taken." "I care nothing for the man, Excellency," Sadao said, "but having operated on him with such success, yes, it only makes me feel you more indispensable to me. Evidently you can save anyone. You are so skilled. You can save anyone." speaking about the prisoner. You say you think I can stand one more such attack as I have had today. I can't. So without you, you are indispensable to me. That means nobody can take your place. So if I have some problem, you have to attend me. Not more than one, Sadao said, that you cannot. So he asked another valid question because he was worrying about himself, his health. So he says that, can I stand one more attack as I have had today? Can I stand? Can I bear? And Sadao says that, no, not more than one. You cannot stand more than one. Then certainly I can allow nothing to happen to you. So this man is very selfish. Okay, see? So I cannot, so because it was for his benefit that he won't allow anything bad to happen to Sadao. Understood? So it means that for his own purpose, he cannot allow anything bad to happen to Sadao. Sadao would have to be fine in order to make him attend any moment of time when he requires, the man requires, the Japanese Major General. So then certainly I can allow nothing to happen to you, the general said with anxiety. His long pale Japanese face became expressionless, which meant that he was in deep thought. You cannot be arrested in any way. Okay, because if you are arrested, then if you are required to come to my place, who will do that? Then I'll have to die. And because he knows that Sadao is indispensable for him, Sadao should not be arrested. So it's a good game that was going on. So the general said, closing his eyes, suppose you were condemned to death and the next day I had to have my operation. So you can understand how this man is only thinking about himself. So there are other surgeons, Excellency, Sadao suggested, and Sadao was in a better position now because he knows that he has confided everything in the general, and the general now knows what to do with Sadao, and he cannot he cannot do anything against him because he wants Sadao by his side, because any moment Sadao can be required. So Sadao suggested, none I trust. The general replied, the best ones have been trained by Germans and would consider the operation successful even if I died. Okay, so they are so ruthless. German would consider the operation successful even if I died. I do not care for their point of view. He sighed, it seems a pity that we cannot better combine the German ruthlessness with American sentimentality. Then you could turn your prisoner over to execution, and yet I could be sure you would not murder me while I was unconscious. The general laughed, and it was a joke that, in a light-hearted manner they were conversing. He had an unusual sense of humor. So as a Japanese, could you not combine these two foreign elements, German ruthlessness and American sentimentality, because you had been taught in America? As a Japanese, could you not combine these two foreign elements? He asked. Sadao smiled, I'm not quite sure, but for your sake, I would be willing to try, Excellency. I can try. So the general shook his head. I had rather not be the test case. Don't test on me. Let me not be the test case. He had an amazing sense of humor. So he said he felt suddenly weak and overwhelmed with the cares of his life. As an official in times such as these, when repeated victory brought great responsibilities all over the South Pacific, it is very unfortunate that this man should have washed up on your doorstep. It is very unfortunate that the man has washed up on your doorstep, and what can be done now? Sadao, he said irritably, it's a problem now. How can we come over it? I feel it so myself. I also feel it myself that it's really a problem, that what can be done with him now. It would be best if he could be quietly killed, the general said. So a suggestion that was given to him, that it would be good if he can be killed. Okay, not by you will not kill him, but by someone who does not know him. I have my own private assassins. So this is the other side of the general. Okay, so he confesses that he has his own private assassins and will be sending one or two of them in order to get him killed, get Tom killed, so that both of them can get rid of the man. But Sadao just listened to him. We still don't know what he wanted. Okay, so that's very important. Suppose I send two of them to your house tonight, or better any night, You need know nothing about it. It is now warm. What would be more natural than that you should leave the outer partition of the white man's room open to the garden while he sleeps, and quietly they can sneak in the assassins and they can kill him and come back. And then both of us will get rid of him. It would be very natural. Sadao agreed to the general's suggestion. In fact, it is so left open every night. Good, the general said, yawning. They are very capable assassins. They make no noise and they know the trick of inward bleeding. If you like, I can even have them remove the body. So this is how it works. And Hannah was so right. Okay, so this is how it works actually. And in order to get rid of him, he is giving all these minute details. Sadao considered that perhaps would be best. Excellency, he agreed, thinking of Hannah, that the family would be saved. After all, he was a family man as well. But still, we know that these are not the actual words of Sadao. He left the general's presence then and went home, thinking over the plan. In this way, the whole thing would be taken out of his hands. He would tell Hannah nothing, and he thought that he would not be confiding in Hannah about this. Hannah nothing, since she would be timid at the idea of assassins in the house, and yet certainly such persons were essential in an absolute state such as Japan was. How else could rulers deal with those who oppose them? Use of sarcasm. A sarcastic remark. See, how else could rulers deal with those who oppose them? This is use of sarcasm. So Japan was such a state, an absolute state. So assassins were very, very important. Sadao says this. He refused to allow anything but reason to be the atmosphere of his mind. Several other things were hovering around his mind. Voice of humanity and an act of kindness. But he cast aside all those logical thinking, and he only thought something that has reason, and the reason, something that has reason, was the act of getting that man killed by the assassins. But reason to be the atmosphere of his mind. As he went into the room where the American was in bed, but as he opened the door, to his surprise, he found the young man out of bed and preparing to go into the garden. So he was coming around slowly and gradually. He was coming around, means he was getting recovered. What is this? He exclaimed. Who gave permission to leave your room? Who gave you the permission to leave your room? I'm not used to waiting for permission. Gosh, I feel pretty good again, but will the muscles on this side feel stiff? Is it so? He forgot all else. Now, when it comes to his duty, he forgot about everything else. That just a while earlier, he was planning about this man's murder. So, he forgot. Now I thought I had provided against that, he murmured. He lifted the edge of the man's shirt and gazed at the healing scar. Massage may do it, if exercise does not. It won't bother me much, the young man said. His young face was gaunt under the stubbly blonde beard. Say, doctor, I've got something I want to say to you. If I hadn't met a Japanese like you, well, I wouldn't be alive today, I know that. Sadao bowed, but he could not speak. He was speechless. Sure, I know that, Tom went on warmly, his big thin hands gripping a chair with the white at the knuckles. I guess if all the Japs were like you, there wouldn't have been a war. If all the Japanese were like you, there wouldn't be a war. So this is his epiphany, his moral revelation, his realization. Okay, so, but there are other things that should also be considered. This was his opinion, this is his conviction. So perhaps, Sadao said with difficulty, and now I think you had better go back to bed. It's better. He did not want to get to start any conversation with this man who is actually an enemy, and he asked him to go to bed. He helped the boy back into bed and then bowed. Good night, he said. Sadao slept badly that night. Time and again he woke, thinking he heard the rustling of footsteps, the sound of a twig broken or a stone displaced in the garden. He was wondering whether the assassins had come or not. A noise such as men might wake who carried a burden. The next morning, he made the excuse to go first into the guest room. If the American were gone, he then could simply tell Hannah that so the general had directed. But when he opened the door, he saw at once that there on the pillow was a shaggy blonde head. He was still there. So it proves that the assassins did not come the other night. He could hear the peaceful breathing of sleep, and he closed the door again quietly. He's asleep. He's almost well to sleep like that. What shall we do with him? Hannah whispered her old refrain. Refrain or repetition. So she kept on repeating, what should we do with that man? But certainly, Sadao shook his head. I must decide in a day or two what can be done with this man. Sadao shook his head. But certainly, he thought the second night must be the night. So the first night the assassins did not turn up. So probably today, that is the next day would be the day when he was there. So they might turn up tonight. So there rose a wind that night, and he listened to the sounds of bending boughs and whistling partitions. Hannah woke to, ought we not to go and close the sick man's partition? He asked. No, he's able to do that. To do that for that to himself. He is able now to do it for himself. The next morning, the American was still there. That night also, the assassins did not come. Then the third night, of course, must be the night. The wind changed to quiet rain, and the garden was full of the sound of dripping eaves and running springs. Sadao slept a little better, but he woke at the sound of a crash and leaped to his feet. What was that? The baby woke at her voice and began to wail, to cry, I must go and see. But he held her and would not let her move. Sadao, what is the matter with you? Don't go. Don't go. His terror infected her, and she stood breathless, waiting. There was only silence. Together they crept back into the bed, the baby between them. Yet when he opened the door of the guest room in the morning, there was the young man. The young man was still there. Nothing has happened to him. He was very gay and had already washed and was on his feet. He had asked for a razor yesterday, and that had shaved himself, and today there was a faint color in his cheeks. So he was recovering day by day. I'm well, he said joyously. Sadao drew his kimono around his weary body. He could not, he decided suddenly, go through another night it was. Not that he cared for this young man's life. No, simply it was not worth the strain. He couldn't take that strain anymore, and he thought that he could not. He decided suddenly go through another night. It was not possible for him because it was very, very strenuous. So he was not able to. So, you are well, Sadao agreed. He lowered his voice. You are so well that I think if I put my boat on the shore tonight with food and extra clothing, you might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. So he thought of, making the man free. This is how he stands tall, and he takes a decision that he would be making him free. He would be making him free by asking him to, flee or to go away from that place. So you are so well that I think if I put my boat on the shore tonight with food and extra clothing in you might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. It is so near the coast that it has nothing been worth fortifying. Nobody lives on it because in storm it is submerged. But this is not the season of storm. You could live there until you saw a Korean fishing boat pass by. They pass quite near the island because the water is many fathoms deep there. So this is how he suggests the man so that he can flee from there, far away from that place, so that his life can be saved. So he acts as a messiah for the war prisoner, and helping him not only to live after the operation, but also to make his future a brighter one. He asks him to leave. And with that note, we'll end the class today, and we'll proceed further later. Good morning, students. We'll continue with Pearl's Bugs the Enemy, and we'll start from page number 43. At this point, Sadao takes the control, or he acquires a control over the moral dilemma that he was undergoing, as well as the inner conflict that he was undergoing as well. And he comes to this realization that following his profession, he should serve humanity. And the last few days were for him really an ordeal, when every night he expected the assassins to come, and early morning he would venture into the enemy's room, that means Tom's room, and to make it certain that the man was alive. So his life was more important to him now, because being a doctor, he saved the enemy's life, and he wanted him to be absolutely fine. And at this point, he arranges for his journey back home so that he can be safe. And That's how it goes. You are well, Sadao agreed. He lowered his voice. You are so well that I think if I put my boat on the shore tonight with food and extra clothing in it, so he actually acts as a messiah of God for the war prisoner, and he helps him escape. You might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. It is so near the coast that it has not been worth fortifying. Nobody lives on it because in storm it is submerged, but this is not the season of storm. So he is also providing him the intricate detail about the place, how he can be safe over there. You could live there until you saw a coring fishing boat pass by. They pass quite near the island because the water is many fathoms deep there. The young man stared at him, slowly comprehending, meaning he now gets to the point. He makes out that the man is really trying to save him. And he was thankful to him for that, for his act of benevolence, for his act of kindness that is hardly seen these days. This chapter or this story also highlights the fact that war is futile, futility of war. In that context, these lines and the ending is reminiscent of Owen's famous poem Strange Meeting, where the characters speak in this way: I am the enemy, you killed my friend. This points out the futility of war, and also the fact that war can only bring destruction and devastation, and human emotions and human feelings, human bond, they're no, they are never given any importance. So Sadao stands tall in this part, and he serves humanity and sets a true example how people should react, how people should extend their hands towards humanity. So, and he tried to comprehend. The young man stared at him, slowly comprehending. Do I have to? He asked. I think so, you understand? It is not hidden that you are here. It's already very, very obvious fact that you are here and that you should leave. The young man nodded in perfect comprehension. Okay, he said simply. Sadao did not see him again until evening. As soon as it was dark, he had dragged the stout boat down to the shore, and in it he put food and bottled water that he had bought secretly during the day. The arrangements were done by him. The boat he tied to a post in the water, for the tide was high. There was no moon, and he worked without a flashlight, okay, so that he cannot be discovered by anybody. When he came to the house, he entered as though he were just back from his work, and Hannah knew nothing about it. Yumi was here today, she said, as she served his supper. Though she was so modern, still she did not eat with him. So very traditional Japanese custom. Yumi cried over the baby. She went on a sigh. She misses him so. The servants will come as soon as the foreigner is gone, Sadao said. And he was very, very certain about the fact that the prisoner will be off, or he'll go very, very fast or very soon. He went into the guest room that night before he went to bed himself and checked carefully the American's temperature, state of wound, like a true doctor. He examined his patient and his heart and pulse. The pulse was irregular, but that was perhaps because of the excitement that he was going through. The young man's pale lips were pressed together and his eyes burned. Only the scars on his neck were red. These scars are symbolic of the fact that the prisoners were treated very cruelly and mercilessly in the camps. I realize you are saving my life again. This is the second time. The first time when he was operated by Sadao Hoki, and the second time when he's arranging his escape, or he's setting him free in another way. So he told Sadao, not at all, it's only my inconvenience to have you here any longer. So he doesn't want to establish any human bond, any kind of, soft emotion with the man. So he doesn't want to establish that, and he right away and blatantly tells him that it's for my convenience. He had hesitated a good deal about giving the man a flashlight, but he had decided to give it to him after all. It was a small one, his pen torch, which he used at night when he was called for for patient and all. If your food runs out, before you catch a boat, signal me 2 flashes at the same instant. So these are the instructions that he's giving. So the same instant the sun drops over the horizon, give me 2 flashes. Do not signal in darkness, otherwise it will be seen. So when the sun, so he says, see, instant the sun drops over the horizon. So at that moment you give me 2 flashes. Do not signal in darkness, for it will be seen. If you are all right but still there, signal me once. Once you will signal if you are all right, and see, twice, 2 flashes at the same instant if the food runs out. So you will find fresh fish easy to catch, but you must eat them raw. A fire would be seen. You have to eat it raw. Okay, the young man breathed. So he was very relaxed, and at the same time he was excited, because it's not quite an easy task that he was venturing for. He was dressed now in the Japanese clothes which Sadao had given him, and at the last moment Sadao wrapped a black cloth about his blonde head so that he cannot be identified as an American. Now, Sadao said, the young American, without a word, shook Sadao's hand warmly as a gratitude, and then walked quite well across the floor and down the step into the darkness of the garden. Once, twice, Sadao saw his flashlight to find his way, but that would not be suspected. He waited until from the shore there was one more flash, then he closed the partition. That night he slept. He slept peacefully. Okay, so there was no fear that the assassins would come and would kill him or slay him. You say the man escaped? The general asked faintly. So after that, this particular incident was reported to the general, and how does he report? He says that the man has escaped. He had been operated upon a week before, an emergency operation to which Sadao had been called in the night. For 12 hours, Sadao had not been sure the general would leave. So he was called for an operation, an emergency operation, and then Sadao had to operate. The gallbladder was much involved. Then the old man had begun to breathe deeply again and to demand food. Sadao had not been able to ask about the assassins at that very, very poignant time. The time was very crucial, and he couldn't ask about the assassins. Why didn't they turn up? So far as he knew, they had never come. The servants had returned, and Yumi had cleaned the guest room thoroughly and had burnt sulfur in it to get the white man's smell out of it, because they abhorred him or they hated him. It was a kind of repulsion for them. So nobody said anything, only the gardener was cross or dissatisfied, angry, because he had got behind with his chrysanthemums. But after a week, Sadao felt the general was well enough to be spoken to about the prisoner. Yes, Excellency, he escaped, Sadao now said. He coughed, signifying that he had not said all he might have said, but was unwilling to disturb the general further. But the old man opened his eyes suddenly. That prisoner, did I not promise I would kill him for you? Suddenly he remembers, okay? He recollects that it was his promise to Sadao that he would kill the prisoner by sending assassins. You did, Excellency, Sadao said. Well, the old man, that means you did promise. Well, the old man said in a tone of amazement. So I did, I promised that I would. I thought of nothing but myself, in short. So, very, very self-centric. In short, I forgot my promise to you. So, absolutely he forgot that he had to send the assassins to kill the prisoner. I wondered, Your Excellency, Sadao murmured. It was certainly very careless of me, but you understand it was not lack of patriotism or dereliction of duty, self-justification he gives, that it was not lack of patriotism or dereliction of duty. He looked anxiously at his doctor. If the matter should come out, you would understand that, wouldn't you? So, he tries to convince the doctor. Sadao was intelligent enough to understand that the general was now trying to convince him, and he well understood this fact as well, that he was under his control now. Certainly, Your Excellency, Sadao said, he suddenly comprehended or understood that the general was in the palm of his hand, and that as a consequence he himself was perfectly safe. Nothing can happen to him as far as this is concerned. I can swear to your loyalty, Excellency, he said to the old general, and to your zeal against the enemy. You are a good man, the general murmured and closed his eyes. You will be rewarded. Okay, so he says that you will be rewarded for keeping it. But Sadao, searching the spot of the black in the twilighted sea that night had his reward. So his reward was not something related to materialistic glory. His reward was not something related to a promotion, or in that case related to money. So his reward was the safety and good health of his patient, of the prisoner of war, that he had safely reached to some place. But Sadao, searching the spot of black in the twilighted sea that night, had his reward. This was his reward. What? There was no prick of light in the dusk. No one was on the island. His prisoner was gone. Safe, doubtless. Okay, so this is his reward. And not the reward that general was talking about. His reward is this, that safety of the prisoner, safety of his patient. Doctor wants that because he had been instrumental in making him come round, in making Tom come round, or making him recover. And now he doesn't want him to die. He wants his safety. And that is when that is achieved, when that is acquired, this man, the good man, Dr. Sadao Hoki, has his reward. For he had warned him to wait only for a Korean fishing boat. He stood for a moment on the veranda, gazing out to the sea from whence the young man had come the other night, and into his mind, although without reason, there came other white faces he had known. The professor at whose house he had met Hannah. A dull man and his wife had been a silly, talkative woman, in spite of her wish to be kind. He remembered his old teacher of anatomy who had been so insistent on mercy with the knife. They were taught how to be merciful with the knives. Now the question is, how can he be merciless? So merciless is the word that is not in his dictionary. So he just wanted the man to leave, and he arranged for his well-being by making arrangements so that he can escape or flee from that place. And then he remembered the face of his fat, slatternly landlady. He had had great difficulty in finding a place to live in America because he was a Japanese. The Americans were full of prejudice. They were prejudiced people, and it had been bitter to live in the place, knowing himself their superior. How he had despised the ignorant and dirty old woman who had at last consented to house him in her miserable home. So it was a miserable place, but at least getting a place to live was enough for him at that time. He had once tried to be grateful to her because she had, in his last year, nursed him through influenza, but it was difficult, for she was no less repulsive to him in her kindness. Now he remembered the youthful, haggard face of his prisoner, white and repulsive. Strange, he thought. I wonder why I could not kill him. The answer is, it lies within. It is because of the fact that he is a doctor. Patriotism, nationalism, all these are abstract concept. The concept that he, harbors inside him, harbors within him, or the fact that they should, these abstract concepts are there, fine, but a man must serve humanity. He should cross the border, cross the race, go beyond countries, go beyond continents, go beyond races, and only serve humanity. And universal brotherhood is established here. That should be prioritized. That should be the order of the day, because wars are futile. The futility of war has been, it has been given here. Okay, so the fact that Perles Back portrays that wars are all futile. They just bring about destruction, demolition, devastation, and goodness is never established through war. So that's why I told you that the last few lines of this theme is very reminiscent of Wilfred Owen's famous poem Strange Meeting, where the poet says, I am the enemy you killed, my friend. So nothing, war, enmity, they see nothing but destruction. So that's how the story ends with Sadao's words, strange, I wonder why I could not kill him. Being an enemy, why he could not kill an enemy? Because he had the good values within him that was nurtured in him by his father, that only to serve humanity humanity. Humanity comes first, and then comes nationalism and patriotism. They are established only if a person is good and kind and benevolent. So with that note, we come to the end of the chapter, and I think the understanding is quite constructive, and the model answers and LAC will be uploaded, and you are expected to write them down in your literature notebook, and the assignment should be completed also in your literature notebook. So signing off.